Thank you for joining Anne's Art Desk. These videos are brought to you by the City of Palo Alto and the Palo Alto Art Center Foundation.
Wow, new day, new page. All right. There's some building blocks for us for today. And there's my other screen. Okay, I think we're getting very close here. So if you're looking at my desk, you can see these sort of basic elements we keep revisiting. And as you think about today's lesson, think about what you're using off of this little list of line, shape, form, value, color, and texture. I tend to think of color and texture both as details, whereas your building blocks are over here. And then value is what makes it look real or interesting. I often find that good compositions rely very heavily on value, whether they're abstract or realistic, figurative. So let me clear this away. I wanted to, on a little side note, I was in a meeting last night because we all do a lot of Zoom meeting. And I made these little line abstracts that I gotta say I really like. I think they're cute. Just want to show them to you. So abstraction can just be made with a pen and a marker. Can you guys see them okay? And they're just, each one is one loop, which is kind of neat. They're a loop that's been shaped into different shapes. So I kind of thought that was cool. I like this one. They could have color added to them or something like that. This one is more like a, who's the guy who did this? Not Mondrian, Miro maybe, just an experiment in color and line. Mm-hmm. But one thing you could do as we start is make a couple composition boxes and see what kind of a composition you can see in this surfer. And what you're looking at is the surfer's really, really dark, and so is his reflection, and the lines of the waves are dark. Everything else is very, very light. So if I were to draw him, he's essentially a silhouette with a little bit of a shadow, and maybe this. That's the light dark pattern.
I can't see what you're doing.
And I can bounce back and forth. Can you guys do that? Can you find the Google Classroom link?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have it pulled up separately.
Okay. Yeah. So think of the different ways you could compose this picture. And think of it just in black and white. What is light and what is dark? And he's kicking this up, and then his shadow begins. But there are other ways to compose it. Maybe he's over here. Maybe he is gigantic on the page, and he's like this. So think for a minute while I go and look at this other thing, how you're going to frame him in your picture. You know, maybe he's here and the horizon is here, and mostly what you see is the beautiful beach and his reflection. So there are a lot of different ways to compose this little picture. And one thing that you can do to save yourself a lot of failure in your life is sort of condense the failure into a small amount of time. So one thing that I see happening with myself and everybody else's art practice is they put a whole bunch of time into a composition they haven't carefully made. So if you carefully make your composition, you save yourself that huge investment that may or may not pay off. So if you compose carefully, a lot of the mistakes painters make is that they haven't composed carefully. And so then they're sort of not happy with their composition, but they've invested a lot of time in it and they don't want to change it. And then they end up with a so-so composed painting. So it actually works quite well to do a little bit of pre-thinking. Let me go over here. So you can click through all the pictures if you have them. Let me know if you don't have them, and I'll just keep screen sharing once in a while so you can see them. Does anybody need me to do that? Anyone? Everybody got it? Okay. This is what I would do for this one. Does anyone have another composition that they could propose? Could also do this, where you get to see a lot more of his shadow. That's kind of high in the composition. So all these little ideas are just prototyping a painting, which is kind of a nice thing to do because you don't put that much effort into it. The whole picture is also, notice the skyline's not straight. My bad. And here one thing you could also do is put this, put the guy walking his dog also in the picture. So see how the two of them together, there's kind of more of a story to the picture. So you could combine the two pictures. There's a cat butt in the camera.
She's trying to help.
Yeah, my cat is actually sequestered for that very reason, because he would be sitting right here asking what I was doing. So here are a couple ideas. Another idea would be to make the surfer bigger and the guy essentially really small. And see how these two are related to each other, but this one is an evolution of the idea. Like there are two stories going on here. They're maybe interacting, but it's a more dynamic composition if these two are closer together and if one is bigger than the other. And all of this is simply kind of standard compositional design. I used to think composing was not something I needed to do, but I find more and more composing is actually incredibly creative and hence quite rewarding. So if you're composing, you kind of have this opportunity to kind of put your thoughts together and see what you can make out of something that's a little bit more creative. You can also try it like this. The surfer and the dog are farther back. Maybe this guy's a little bigger. So see how you're just sort of wiggling the same elements around in slightly different ways. And doing this makes for a much more solid and well thought out composition. You can even try like, is the guy with the dog really far away and right here? So that's what I would do with composing here, but there's another layer, right? And that's that we want to abstract the image. So let me turn the page. Do you guys want to see a bit more about composition? Do you want to see it happen another time or two? Because something we can do is just take like this one and essentially do the same process. So now I have that city with the pink building and the crane up. And this is kind of interesting because the entire foreground is in shadow. And the pink building's a little darker than the others. And then there's this giant crane coming through here and this thing. So look what a dynamic little composition that makes. It's kind of fun. I'm not sure I would work much harder on that one than what I've done. It's a little darkness there too. I could probably wiggle it a little bit. You know, you can also do things like maybe it's more like this, with the skyline being a smaller element. And this, it being about the sky. You know, it's about this part of the painting. The sky plays a part in the painting. So there are different ways to do it. You could also do something more like this, where most of the painting is the dark, and then the uprights reach up like this, and then most of it is dark. So these two are sort of opposite compositions of each other. One is putting a lot of light in your picture, and one is putting a lot of dark in your picture. But they're both taken from the same image. Which is kind of fun. All right, shall we flip back to the surfer and sort of develop the abstract idea there? So I think to do this, I would take like a light color of pencil, maybe a blue. And essentially make an abstract design from my source. So I always give myself a frame to work in. That way, if I decide to frame my work, I can do it.
Are you using a watercolor pencil at this point?
I think I may be. I'm not sure. I would like to. See, this one is. Let's use this one. Because it's nice to have watercolors. And I'm doing it a little darker than I think you should do it, just because I want you to be able to see it. So I want you to see my planning lines, but these really are planning lines. They're not so much going to be part of the finished painting. So let me switch back to Surfer Guy. Dog.
And
yeah,
it's Surfer Dude.
What? Oh,
Surfer Dude.
Right, that's definitely dude or bro. Definitely. Okay, thank you. So I kind of liked the ones. I liked the ones where you saw his reflection. I think it's important. The other thing that we didn't try is doing it like this. And I kind of like the idea of him sort of headed off the paper, or you could also do him headed out to sea. I guess I like him headed off the paper because then I get to look at his shadow, which I kind of enjoy. Something that's kind of neat here is that no matter what you do, see that really bright white on his shoulders?
Yeah.
I actually think that'll be part of the finished picture. Because I really love his reflection. And if you see where it's not riffled, it's literally a true reflection. It's reversed. So they have to match. Okay. Now, I think that I am going to do this in, I'm sorry to say, Sharpie, but you don't have to. I think Sharpie is kind of a weird choice. I just want you to be able to see it. Let's see what else I've got. Let's do Sharpie. And something you can do when you're painting is essentially arrange your colors in value order and then use them as values. So I have a selection of colors. You can do this with the colored pencils, with crayons, whatever you want. We'll even have a gray, which is kind of useful. So let me arrange them in color order. So that's sort of value order. It's not rainbow order, it's value order. You can also do this with pencils, markers, Posca pens. The other thing that's kind of nice to do, that since this is drawing, would be to start with a essentially a black tool and see if you can make a black and white illustration or a black and white abstract. So maybe I'll start there and then add some color. So one way, if the idea here is to do 3 ways to abstraction, one way is to simply flatten all the forms. So there are lots of ways to abstract. Let me start making a list of them. So you can flatten the form, and that's what I think we might start with. This is something Matisse kind of did a lot. So if we flatten the form, we kind of want his arm and his back, and then his head. And do you see how his legs are much darker than other things in the picture? So I want to be careful to, I want to also preserve this stuff because I want it to be bright white when I'm done. Kind of shows that what he's walking through. And then his surfboard is sort of a different color. I'm probably going to come in with white paint and make his, you know, make that little dot on his back. So let's see. One of the things you can also do with abstraction is you can alter the color to your own benefit. So right now he's carrying a light gray surfboard. What if I just decide he has a purple surfboard? It's kind of neat. And then maybe he's sort of all purple. I have this like nice sort of blue. That one's dead. I have a nice sort of purple. I would ordinarily spend a little time drawing carefully to make sure that the reflection matches the object, the person who's casting it. But notice at no point have I drawn like water droplets, hair, ears. I think a big way abstraction begins is that you drop away the details. I'm just kind of making marks that, because I'm drawing rather than painting, you get a scribblier look than I would if I was painting abstractly. Notice how the reflection frays a little bit, like because of the riffles in the water. I get that effect. I forgot to paint in his head. You can combine colors. especially like flesh tones tend to be very warm. And so sort of exaggerating that almost into orange can be useful. You can also layer stuff. Sometimes you can put stuff over stuff. So this is a watercolor pencil laid over the marker. And I'm painting really big. You may want to paint half this size, just because of the tools you have, which are mostly drawing tools. It's just kind of fun. Let's see if it is water-soluble stuff. Yeah, the blue is. It's kind of cool. Now I'm sort of wishing I hadn't used the marker. But see how essentially abstraction is kind of freedom from all the detail you put into your life. And I think that's why people really love doing it, because you need to see things in relation to each other rather than see them as if you're looking at them through a microscope. I just remembered where I put my watercolor pencils. Any questions?
Where is?
So something that might help this picture a great deal, besides making him look less red, which I think he just came out really red. See, that looks a lot more like a wetsuit. And the kind of screaming purple of this kind of bugs me, so I'm going to alter it a little bit. One thing I love about watercolor pencils is when you run them into a puddle, they just start painting. And I think that I would continue the sort of the theme of flattening the form and trying to make a lot of these little marks kind of become color fields instead of marks, because the marks are sort of bugging me. So see how I didn't, there are lots of waves and riffles and things in the picture, but I didn't include them because it's not a plein air landscape painting. It's not a studio landscape painting. It's really meant to be a kind of a color field painting that's fairly abstract. But see how little you need? I didn't paint much. There's really not much there. And yet still it sort of reads as what it is. So in many ways it's sort of more realistic than I wanted. Okay, so something I might do at this point is find some white of some kind, either a pen or just my gouache. Still like the gouache approach, I guess. and just put, you can use whiteout and just put that beautiful mark right there. And kind of show the strength of the light out in the water. And if you don't like all these black lines, you can use the whiteout or the white paint or the white pen to diminish them. I didn't draw his shadow very well, so I can also sort of fudge it and change that. It is amazing to me, like, I really thought that this lesson would very simply work out as an abstract drawing lesson, but you'll notice essentially that I'm cheating. All of a sudden I'm actually doing a painting, essentially because I can't help myself. But look at how I add more white into this, and it starts to make more sense. Essentially, I'm trying, I guess I somehow using a line in an abstract painting just looks really weird to me. So I'm kind of running around the picture, getting rid of the lines. Any questions? Any thoughts or ideas? Shall we take it another step or another direction? Guys all busy painting something. It's amazing how hard I find it to not just paint. You know, in many ways, painting is a shortcut. Because you're mass drawing and not line drawing, you're kind of designing and painting shapes and form and light. It's actually faster than line drawing, I think. Because in line drawing, you essentially have to conceptualize where the line is. And you have to make up that information for yourself. Wow, it's looking better the more I erase the Sharpie. The Sharpie was not my best idea ever. Funny. So there's a lot of stuff on here that I don't really like, which is like, you see how this doesn't line up? And I have too much stuff on my painting to do it correctly. So one thing you can do is just wipe stuff off so it's dry enough to draw on. But you'll notice I actually destroyed my painting. I destroyed the paper, so maybe not right now, maybe later. Yeah, the paper is fraying because this is really something you would do on a different medium or different cardstock. So that's sort of step one. It's not very abstract, but I actually think it's a pretty nice little painting. I like it. Something you could do here is click back to the guy with the dog and see if you can add him. Like, is there a place that he would fit? Has to be very simple. Notice that we don't really need to know what the position of the dog is to read it as a dog. Right now it looks like an octopus, but you can just add him in there. Maybe change him a little bit. Something that's kind of neat about abstraction, and something I've noticed most abstract artists do, is they have a piece of art in their studio, and they often stay in the studio for a very long time, and just sort of keep on working on it a little bit. I'm not sure. So early on in this painting, I made a lot of decisions about adding a lot of pink and orange to the painting, sort of as a one way to abstraction is to modify your colors a whole bunch. And now I kind of regret that. It's really pink. But it also took 10 minutes, so it's not that big of a deal. Get my then I can go back in and like make it look a little bit more like a dog, or make his shadow look more like or make his reflection look more like a shadow. So see how the painting is more interesting for having two visual elements in it?
Yes.
It kind of looks a little bit more like a beach. So let's see. You can flatten the form and you can alter the color. Let's see what else we could do. One way to do abstraction. Is everybody still with me?
Mm-hmm.
You all busy working? So let's see, another way to do abstraction is to, you can like, if you really want to leave figurative behind, you can stretch the forms or change their basic shape. So you could, for instance, circle or squarify the forms, or work in sort of blocks. I can put some people in the feed who do this kind of work. I think Betty Krause is in there already. Everything she does is an oval. But one thing you could do is, let me give myself another box. Is simply look at the original picture, and instead of drawing a human, just use it as a source for shapes. So see how the basic elements are all still the same? But this would not ever make a picture the way this picture is. It's not meant to be a figurative drawing. This is a figurative abstract. And it's actually pretty darn close to just being realistic. And then something that's really fun to do, and I think a lot of professional abstract painters do this, is they make a little palette like this. And they look at the original picture and they think about what colors appear in the original picture that they love. So like this blue-green, or maybe there's a place for some red, or just some green-green. I can probably find a place for this indigo. Actually, that's black. And a place for this yellow. And probably a place for, I think I already used this one, that. And maybe another spot that's even in a different tool, like that. And then a whole bunch of white. So I'm going to leave the white there because I'm going to use it. So this is actually, this is a technique a lot of people use. They set their palette first. So Mitchell Johnson does this. He's a local. And Linda Christensen does this. And sometimes they actually put it on the picture. I think that I don't really like the selection I ended up with. And I might cross off the screen and replace it with a different blue. Because I want it to be more blue, yellow, red combination than I want it to be. This green looks really off to me, so I'm just going to remove it. It doesn't look like it belongs. This is one of the things a little bit like composing ahead of time. you kind of want to think about, does something actually make sense? And if it doesn't, change it before you begin. So to me, this is kind of a pretty palette. I like this one. And I also don't think, because this is such a high key painting, I don't like, keep putting my brush down. I don't like this black either. I'm going to eliminate it from my selection. And then this is probably a very standard way people start with abstract. They take a real image and they break it into some very simple elements. And it's essentially the same composition. So what I might do is say, well, this one is really, really red. And there's also sort of a red square up here. This guy has red up here. And I might make this one red too. And this little sketch I'm making is very much founded on basic compositional principles of like a third. Things are happening at the thirds. Things are weighted toward light. So this is one way to do it. I'm not really intrigued with this, but I'm going to keep running through it. And see where it goes. I don't think I would naturally ever paint this picture, but anyway. I do find it a very creative process. Just sort of fiddling around, seeing what happens. Let's see, maybe this goes here. And then I need something fairly dark for here. And I go back to my palette and see what might fit. That's pretty dark, but also this is pretty dark. Let's see. I think I like the original purple. Or it can just be this one. Oh, I like this one better. So I'm going to choose the indigo one and cross all these off. I don't like any of them. So this sort of choose your palette ahead of time technique, I think a lot of painters use it. When I have done some fairly large commissions, I often will give a palette to the customer and say it's going to be about in these colors. And that's not because I want to paint sofa art, it's because I don't want to paint the painting again. So I just want to make it very clear to them what sort of a color set they're going to get. Let's see. To me, it's still fairly boring. Does anyone have any suggestions? How about that yellow? Where was that yellow? Yeah, here we go. I bet it would look nice with some of this. So see how nobody would tell you this is surfers, but it does make an interesting visual image. And that's because it sort of uses all the basic composition rules we've been talking about. The other thing you could do is if you just want to add a painting layer, just paint with white. Let's see. Does anybody have questions about this? Anything to add? Anything you're discovering as you paint? So in every painting, eventually I stop painting the source material and I start painting from my own mind. And I make a very resolute decision to stop painting what my source material is and start making a picture that I like, that I think has some staying power.
Is that only when you do abstract stuff?
No, it's always. And it's actually, I think, it's something that might separate artists from students.
Mm.
And you should be an artist as quickly as you can. So I would suggest you just start thinking about doing it. Because whatever you're painting, whether it's your beautiful cat or a landscape or a flower or an abstract, it has to hold its own. It has to be itself. And the person who looks at it will never know your cat or your flower or your landscape. They'll only know your painting. It's getting more interesting with the white paint. And I keep eating away at the lines again. I keep not wanting the lines. So it actually makes a big difference to think to yourself, what makes this little piece of paper hang together? As itself, not pretending to be, just got to disconnect it from its source material. And this is actually this is one of the things that gets people hooked on painting, because it's a very creative thing to do. To just start thinking about, well, what is this thing by itself? What does it have to say all by itself? Because now I'm liking it better and better the more I fuss with it. There is always a point in every painting where you start liking it less and less the more you paint on it. I don't like those lines there either, but I'm going to cover them over with the red, which I may have to do when it's dry. But it's certainly more interesting for this. We're sort of fiddling with it a little bit with some water and some white paint. Yeah, the lines really distract me, so I keep hitting them again to have them back away. I think I then have to come back in and strengthen the reds. And maybe even think about, is there another place the red belongs? Maybe it goes all the way off, which means there probably should be something over here. That's not so bad. If you do want line to be an element in your picture, you can make abstracts that are purely line, and just add some in. So now I've left my inspiration behind. Now I'm just looking at my picture and just trying to make it rich and interesting to look at. Okay, shall we try another way? So that was 1, 2. There is a really nice other way to do this. And there are infinite ways. It's kind of up to you and what you decide you'd like to paint. So I'm kind of using both what's on Google Classroom and both my sort of original my original painting to make an abstract idea. Does anyone have another kind of abstract idea to suggest? Because one thing you can do is simply take the colors that you made and do a completely non-objective painting. So this is an abstract painting, but there's another painting too, which you can do, where you take your palette, I guess, which is this one, this one, this one, this one, and white. So I'll remake it just so you can see it. This one, this one, this one, and this one. They kind of go together. They're very red, yellow, blue. And something you can do is just take these 4 pictures, these 4 ones, and this really isn't abstraction. This is where you go from, you change from being an abstract artist to a non-objective artist. So abstraction has its roots in figurative art. So you can actually, you know, it looks like reality, except people have warped it a little bit or changed the color or done something interesting to it. Figurative. And abstraction really is something that grew out of realism. And then people were like, wait, what if there's nothing in the picture? I'm going to be a non-objective artist. And this is like Rothko, Pollock, Jackson Pollock, Cy Twombly, some of Gerhard Richter's work, but not all of it, where they're just making big, beautiful marks. Joan Mitchell is a good example too. And you can look all these people up. These are all very famous modern artists. So you've probably seen them around. Some of the people I mentioned are a little more obscure, just they're people I follow or I like or I know. But these are some of the big people. So these are the people who first thought of the idea of like, what if it doesn't look like anything? What if it is just sort of a symphony of color or a contrast of shapes? And they just leave the whole idea that there's a design behind. So abstraction usually has a design, non-objective artwork. It might have a design, but it's literally a real objective is to be non-objective, to just look like something interesting to look like. I find this work kind of hard to do. That's one reason I made my picture much smaller, because I find that it takes a lot of sort of care. And it's super creative. It's super like, I'm just going to use this set of colors to make interesting shapes. You know, this is the kind of art that often people say my kid could do that. Or I could paint that. And one of the responses artists have to it is yes, but did you? Something that's lovely about watercolor pencils is you can decide whether you're going to melt them or not. I think when people try to do non-objective work, their biggest pitfall is that everything muds together and gets really, really muddy. So you might want to try a little restraint and not mix your colors too much. This one kind of came out much more like an abstract than I wanted it to. But I think most of my non-objective work does that. I kind of like Rothko's sort of big squares, where he uses this format a lot. So that's 3 ways, but there are so many ways to abstract things. Maybe you're really tickled by the idea of like something like this. So the way to make something like this is very simple. You just take a line and then see where it's going. This is actually a really great way to start doing abstraction. All I did was scribble that flowy line on there, and then I started adding some other elements. And this is super de-duper creative. It's so kind of fun to do. You know, you can literally do anything you want with it. And it's a very easy way to start kind of doodling on a different level. I really like ombre effects where things change as you pass over them. Let's see, and then you can also add something fun like, you know, a very different kind of mark. Maybe this one's sort of bossy and just walks over the entire composition. But do you see how this is stuff is essentially just doodling. But instead of doodling with just your pencil or your pen in a meeting, you're kind of doodling with composition and design in mind, which sort of makes it more playful and to some extent more like a piece of art. Then look what happens when I add a contrasty color. This one. It kind of brings the picture to life. I'm very much on a red, yellow, blue kick today for some reason. Maybe I can make something more rich and more interesting. I actually think, you know, people say all I can do is doodle, but I actually think doodling is a very noble sport that leads to an awful lot of creativity. And I see no problem with it. I actually think it's a very important part of art, and you can actually use your doodle power to start making abstract art or realist art. Look how much more interesting these are with an extra layer. I kind of like this one being blue too. there's that. And as always, I'm very tempted to bring out the gouache. I don't know where my gouache is right now. Does anybody have questions about any of these? One of the interesting things about teaching this class is that it makes me think about and experiment with things I haven't experimented before, and I'm really enjoying it. I mean, abstraction is essentially just freedom. Maybe once again, I don't like that red boundary very much. So as soon as you start making your own mark and sort of leaving your source material behind and starting to think about the painting as its own project, that's pretty much what at that point you can give yourself a certificate that says I'm an artist. When I was very young, I ran into this wonderful teacher who said, you know, you got to stop being a student and start being an artist. It's really important to just begin the process. All right, any questions or ideas about this stuff? I'm just making it more and more elaborate. It actually looks a little bit like a hieroglyphic at this point. Okay. Anyone having some fun with this? All right. Do you guys want to look at the homework that you turned in a little bit, or do you want me to comment privately? Yeah, look at the homework. Sheila, Shauna, your cameras are off, so I can't see your expression if you're communicating silently. You can just talk too. Hi. Hi there.
I must confess that I haven't stayed up with any practice or
Yeah.
It's so absurd because all we have is time.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's, in some ways, it gives you an opportunity to just find so many interests. There's so much going on, so many classes and
things to do.
Yeah, and then keeping up on, you know, everything going on in the world. So I don't have anything to share with you.
That's
but
right.
I'm sitting here resolving that I will create a daily practice, even if it's just for a few minutes of
if you
playing with this.
Do you want a couple ideas on that?
Sure.
Leave your stuff set up every day. Don't put it away.
Yeah, that's hard.
Just say this table is mine, or this counter is mine, or this piece of floor is mine, whatever it is. And then the other thing is every day leave something that you're eager to do the next day. So leave it half done. Leave something, you know, leave yourself with even write yourself a note about where you were. What do I want to do tomorrow? So that when you come back to the table, you're not creating the entire creative experience from nothing. The other thing I would suggest for getting started is just get started. Just make a scribble, make a doodle, even just mix the colors on your palette. And about 5 or 10 minutes in, the ideas will begin to flow, even if you have none to start with. I do find that if I have a bad cold, I can't paint. Like the brain space is not there. And so when I have a bad cold, I do something else. So there are conditions where it just doesn't work. But if you're feeling great and, you know, you're like, I'd really not want to doom scroll right now, just leave your space set up, leave something to do, and just begin. Maybe some music. I had a friend who always lit a candle and drank a cup of tea right before starting every day. And she said, it's really Pavlovian because I light the candle, I drink the tea, I make the art. So you can make yourself a little ritual.
I love rituals, so that's a great idea. Thank you.
You know, whatever your ritual is, mine tends to be shove the stuff out of the way, sit down, and sequester the cat somewhere. Yeah. So it doesn't have to be something spiritual or anything. It just has to be something you do every day. Even something like, I'm going to wash my hands and my face and start my art. After a few weeks of doing that, you'll wash your hands and your face and feel like starting your art.
So I journal every day, and that's kind of my morning beginning, and then I'm not leaving any time to go to the next phase of doing, you know, something beyond it, creating with the non-written word. So
what I would suggest you do is make the journaling segue into the artwork.
Yes, and I just have started a new journal to do that for fall.
Okay.
And I've been adding some collage to it.
Yeah, yeah, because you know, something you could do is write a poem, or you know, talk about what feelings you see in your artwork. So your ritual could be, I journal before I begin my artwork. Or I journal after my artwork, and in the journal I think about what artwork I'm going to make the next day. The other thing that I find super helpful is I don't beat myself up for not doing art. That just makes me not do art more because I feel bad about myself. So just be kind. If there's a day when you meant to do art and you didn't, just think, okay, tomorrow's another day. Tomorrow I'll try again.